Check, check. Call this meeting to order. Start with the.
Everybody got your mics on?
Everybody,
His on,
ready? Begin. I pledge
pledge
allegiance
allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Roll call. Clint Nelson is here. Vice Chair Julie Johnson.
Present.
Okay. Peter Hensley.
Present.
Bill Stewart.
Will not be here.
Okay. Chad Williams.
Present.
Beautiful. All right, now, tiny print needs glasses. Instructions to allow public comment on agenda items from those attending this
Yeah.
meeting via teleconference or video conference. If at any point anyone would like to ask a question or make a comment and have joined this meeting on their computer, they can click the raise hand button located at the bottom of the screen. We will be alerted they would like to speak. When called upon, please unmute the microphone and ask the question or make comments in no more than 3 minutes. Those who have joined by dialing a number on their telephone will need to press *6 to unmute themselves and then *9 to alert us they would like to speak. Slight pause will also be offered at the conclusion of each agenda item discussion to allow public members an opportunity to make comments and ask questions. Seating of alternates. We have 3 out of 4. I think that's a quorum. So Chad, we want you to stay and listen, but we are not going to seat an alternate.
10-4.
Okay. Item number 6, additions, deletions, amendments to the agenda. I'll start with the staff. Staff, anything I want to change on this agenda?
No.
No? Okay. Committee members, anything you want to change?
Nope.
Okay, all right. Item 7, public comment relating to items not on the agenda. Do we have any public members?
We have some public members, but nobody's raised a hand. And we have not received any written comments either.
Oh, no written comments. Okay. All right, item number 8, approval of minutes. All of you received copies of the minutes of the June 14th meeting. And so I'm asking if there are any suggested changes or comments on those minutes. If not, I'm looking for a motion.
I move we accept them.
Second.
Pete moves, Julie seconds. Approval of the minutes. So Dahlia, you want to call the roll?
Well, you're all here in person, so you can do a voice vote.
Oh, okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, no. Oh, and I said aye. Okay.
Hmm.
All right. It's unanimous. Done. Done. DUN done. Okay. All right. General manager comments. Tom, that's you.
Yeah, and I apologize to those here who were at the E&O committee who may have heard this, but I'm trying to make sure people get the word that in the next week and a half or so, the United States Bureau of Reclamation or Department of Interior is going to make a determination on how to cut 2 to 4 million acre feet from the 15 million acre feet of supplies coming down the Colorado River. Well, when I say 15 million acre feet, I mean that's the 15 million acre feet of people's rights they've been given. But the river is only delivering about 12 million acre feet, maybe 13 a year. And so there's an imbalance, and that's why Lake Powell and Lake Mead look that way. The seven basin states have been, kicking the can down the road for decades, trying to sort this out. Everybody's known that there's been over extraction. Everybody's been trying to figure out how to mitigate it, with all sorts of fancy footwork, but the basic math is the basic math. And so something's got to happen because the Bureau of Reclamation's #1 goal is to protect the production of hydropower. Another wrinkle came in, they realized in Lake Powell, when it starts getting really low, the intakes for the Navajo Nation and Page, Arizona are too high. They've got other ways that get the water out of it, but if they go down below a certain level, those folks run out of water. And, there's a federal treaty to provide the water to the Navajo Nation, so they can't do that. And so Lake Mead is getting to critical low levels. If nothing's done within a couple of years, it'll be a dead pool. That means nobody gets any water. And so I saw a quote from the former GM at Metropolitan Bay that said, all your rights in the world mean nothing if there's no water. And so they were given till the 3rd week of August to come up with a voluntary method to make that 2 to 4 million acre foot cut. We had a presentation at an Aqua seminar last week where the guy who's the head of Colorado River programs for MWD laid out the discussions. He's one of the people at the table negotiating. And the Bureau of Reclamation has a couple of options. One, they can just come to the water rights hierarchy, where there are certain people with the highest rights along the river and then people with the lowest rights, and just cut all the low rights people. Problem is that puts Phoenix out of water. And so you'll be basically be depopulating the urban areas of Arizona. So that's not going to happen because that's just, not really feasible. Or at least it'll put a severe problem in Arizona. And so politically, that's not going to work. Another way to go about it would be to do an even cut across everybody and say, all right, everybody's taking, this is about 30%. If you take 4 million acre feet out of 15, you're about 30%. Everybody gets a 30% haircut. And that's going to probably cause some grumbling from the people who say, well, I shouldn't have to take the same cut as these guys, my lower rights. Lawsuits ensue. Another way to go about it is they might say that, right now, when you have water in Lake Mead, the federal government takes all the losses, all the evaporative and leakage and losses in the system. And like, if you were to store 1 million acre feet in Lake Mead, it stays 1 million acre feet, even though 10% of it's evaporating every year. And our government made it. They might just say, we're no longer doing that. That'll save a couple million acre feet. Your rights are being cut down by the amount of losses in the system. And another option they would have would be to look at beneficial uses, which would be to prioritize the beneficial uses for the people over, and this is the way it's interpreted, over certain agricultural practices. And he even mentioned alfalfa, because there's a huge amount of alfalfa being grown in the Southwest because water's cheap and they can do 3 or 4 cuttings a year that could be grown elsewhere, just maybe not as cheaply. And so they might look at certain uses and bar those. I don't know what they're going to land on. I support the last one. I think that, we use water stupidly out there. But the guy with Met says they're optimistic they're going to get there. What it'll probably entail is paying huge truckloads of money to farmers not to farm out there. And, it's strange to me that a public resource that is water, that some individuals now have a property right to it, to where if it's taken from them, they could sue or have to be compensated for what belongs to everyone. But somehow the fact that they put a piece of paper in a tin can with a rock in it 110 years ago gives them a property right to it that can't be abridged in some way. And I think that hopefully wouldn't stand up through the legal process, but of course that would take decades, and they don't have that kind of time, because if nothing's done, we're going to be in dire straits. And it's not like, oh, we're all going to have to take a little bit of haircut. First, the power system is going to be negatively affected, and then the water system. What does it mean for San Diego County? Well, in the San Diego County Water Authority's agreement with IED, although Byzantine and legalistic and difficult to read because it's very hard, that the gist of it, if IED has to take a cut, San Diego takes a cut as well. The open question is whether San Diego has to pay for it if they take that cut. Now, Metropolitan has supplies, so that if San Diego loses some of their IED water, they can get it from Metropolitan. It's not that we're going to run out of water, but there will be broad region-wide cutbacks coming should that happen, I would imagine. Now, Met has a whole bunch of water in storage, but some of that's in Lake Mead. A good amount of it's in Lake Mead, so they can ride it out. I think one of the critical factors, and Mr. Hazenkamp indicated as much, is that it will rain again in Northern California. Lake Oroville will fill again, but the Colorado system is not going to fill again until we stop taking more out of it than goes into it. This is just math. And so that's kind of where we're at. So it'll be hitting the media here, I'd imagine, in the next week and a half. I don't expect a resolution to happen anywhere but up to the last minute, or maybe the last for an extension or something like that. But I agree that the federal government should step in, because, and I personally support the beneficial use aspect of it, because I think that some of these, the way that they're talking about, people are talking about the water rights market for spot transfers now is up close to $1,500 an acre foot. And they're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars being sent to people for 1 year fallowing. And it's crazy when you talk about that many. And that's just, so not in the public interest, but it's probably the easy way, right? It's probably easier for Congress to print money. In the bill that just got passed over the weekend, Senator Sinema from Arizona got $4 billion put in there to deal with this situation. I hope that $4 billion just doesn't go to make rich farmers richer, but that could be the simpler way to do it, to keep out of court and to try to buy time. which would be kind of sad. I think that but it's Congress, it's politics, it's the water in the West, which has been a saga for forever. And so it'll go on, but so we'll see. So stay tuned. That's my comments.
Comments, questions?
I just have a question from someone in the community. How will any of this impact what we're doing in our pursuit to leave San Diego water?
It really doesn't have any impact because we're both kind of part of Metropolitan, and the Metropolitan has access to water from State Water Project and Colorado. They both happen to be in shortage right now. Colorado's kind of permanent. The State Water Project will flood again. It will. I mean, I don't know if it's gonna be this year or next year, but just like last time, Oroville was overflowing and failing in 2019, was it, I think, or in that time frame? And so we'll have water again on that, and we'll fill up all the reservoirs, and we'll be hunky-dory. I think that in the short term, it's more likely, I think, that the governor will proclaim cutbacks to everyone, irrespective of location and supply, than it is that Met will curtail it to us. But we shall see. I think a lot hinges on what happens out here in the next couple of weeks, and what happens over the next 6 months as far as hydrology in the Sierra. And we really need, if it's dry again next year, all bets are off. It's going to be a pinch everywhere, because there's just, we've fiddled around the edge of this thing for so long, and now the chickens have come home to roost. And if you have an extended, it would be 3 dry years on the Sierra, plus the getting down to Deadpool in the east. It's going to be hard cuts across the board. It's more than likely, though, that before massive urban cuts are made, there's going to be tons of cash going out to farmers in the Imperial Valley, and Yuma and Blythe, to stop growing what they're growing. I mean, there'll be plenty of food. People say, "Oh, we need food." The majority of the water is not used for food that we eat. It's used
It's all
out there for export, for alfalfa and cattle fodder. That's the majority of the water use.
Just briefly, explain again the evaporation and the government thing option.
So let's say that,
Can't stop it from evaporating.
right, well, let's say that 15 million acre feet did land on was an inflow to the river system. By the time it gets out through the various lakes, Powell, Meade, Havasu, et cetera, Mojave, I think that's in between there. There's a certain amount of evaporation because it's huge surface area in the middle of the desert. The government eats that part, and then you still have 15 million acre feet for delivery at the end of it. So what should happen is
What do you mean the government eats that?
that means that let's say we got 15 million acre feet, and this person has 5, that person has 5. By the time it goes to the system, it's down to 14, right? Let's say, because it evaporated. We don't take that 14 divided by 3. We take 15 divided by 3. So we're giving the people more water than existed, and the evaporative losses and seepage and other losses along the way. The federal government doesn't apply that to the out where it goes out. And so
That's just a cash flow financial.
oh yeah,
It has nothing to do with conserving or reallocating supply.
the system was set up by the powers that be a long time ago in the Colorado Compact, 100 years ago this year. There were people who wanted to have big celebrations about it. They've been planning for, it's been 100 years old. And they're like, oh man, this system just isn't working. I don't even want to celebrate that. And so, yeah, heretofore, and when the Water Authority have been talking about trying to get Lake Mead storage, they say it's the greatest storage ever. You don't have to pay for losses. Well, that comes back to bite you at that point. They're giving away water they didn't have, essentially. And it's just exacerbated
Just
the
don't
problem.
see how that option would improve the situation at all, because evaporation is going to happen. I can understand, for example, saying that you can't use it to grow alfalfa because that water then isn't going to get pumped to those farmers.
Right.
And so then the water can be reallocated to humans. But I don't understand how the government paying for a
Well,
million acre feet of evaporative losses is going to resolve.
Well, they've got to balance the inputs and outputs. So right now, let's say 13 million acre feet was to land, but people had 15 million acre feet of rights, or 2 million under. But in that 13 million acre feet, 10% of it goes away. So there's another 1.3 million acre feet. We're still taking out 15 million. What they're talking about is taking whatever the vapor number is, and cutting everybody's rights, the 15 million down to
Okay. so that's how they
13.7,
supply.
right? So
Okay,
that way we just, oh, there's a
I got it.
$1.3 million cut.
I got
So
it. I
you
got
no
it.
longer have rights to that 15. Now it's 13.7 as a starting point.
I got it.
That's what
I
they're
got
doing.
Okay.
They're gonna cut
So
your
they're
rights.
They're gonna allocate on a real number, not an artificially
Yes.
inflated.
Yeah, well, it worked out for a while, but for the last 20 years, it certainly hasn't worked. What happens now, especially with the temperature going up, is the land takes more. When they had almost normally at 89-90% of the snowfall in the Colorado, but the inflow to the stream was only like 65%. And the land is sucking up more because it's warmer, there's more evapotranspiration and everything else going on. So that's what
Okay,
happens.
well, that was thrilling.
Interesting times.
Yeah.
Item number 10, finance manager comments. Tracy?
Yeah, so we are in the middle of our audit, our year end, not our audit, but our year end to prepare for the audit, which is the first part of September. We keep a really aggressive schedule. So it'll be a little busy right up to that. I should have an update for you on how that's going with audit at our next committee meeting. But so far things are going really well with year end. It just gets really busy over the next 4 weeks with that.
Renee and Tracy, you're committed not to work Labor Day weekend
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, 1 year we worked the entire weekend, like 12-hour days, but we've come a long way since then. I think that was 2 or 3 years ago.
2 years ago.
Oh,
I'm
good.
sure there's a lot of work.
There is. It's probably our busiest month of the year. So that's it.
Okay. Committee member comments. Do any committee members have any comments? Julie?
No, I don't.
Pete? No, none for me. Okay, so we'll get down to some action items here. Item 12, amending and updating the administrative code section 5.02.010, centralized purchasing.
Okay, so this is an update to our purchasing administrative code. In the event that we are going to accept federal funds, like federal grant funds specifically, we have already accepted some federal funds indirectly through the water arrearages program that went through the state. But those were specifically to be used to offset customer accounts. There weren't any purchases involved, so we didn't have to follow this code yet. So what it does is it requires us to follow a lot of extra guidelines if we do end up accepting federal monies. And I wanted to make sure I got this in front of the board before we get to the point where we are going to look at accepting funds, because it does require a lot of work for the procurement staff and for purchasing. So it's important that when we gauge taking, federal funds that we think about what it entails to do that. So mainly there's a separate section in here. It's under 12, all the items that we would need to be aware of
Just a
if we
few.
did get a federal contract. So we won't have to do this on all purchases. It's mainly just specific to the types of funding that we receive. So we just want to make sure we look closely at that when we're assessing whether or not to accept funds.
I think
But
that what we'll end up doing is a lot of our bid contracts, procurement documents will just have these standard provisions in most of it, because trying to parse out which purchases for which, when you're ordering inventory of valves and stuff, some valves might. So
generally, they do like you to use these procurement rules on all your procurement once you've accepted federal money.
yeah, that's
So-
gonna be the most,
That's the most
Okay.
onerous part of it.
Yeah.
A lot, what I've looked at on admin codes for this on a lot of other districts is they separate out the really onerous federal requirements, which I've done here. So. But the basic ones we do try to do on all of them. We try to split it so we can, utilize some of the smaller businesses. And then, of course, always make sure that we're reviewing for conflict of interest.
What is the percentage likelihood that you'll make a request? That you'll get?
in the long run, I think it's 100% that we will end up with some federal grant money, especially on the groundwater project. That's one that they're funding regularly these days.
We really just don't want to accept like $50,000 and be subject to this on all of our procurement. We want to really look at getting some big money.
What is the projected indirect cost?
Oof.
I once, an agency I
That's
used to
something.
work with, when we had, especially if you get into some of the contracts where they require a lot of reporting on it, on the grants, that you can look at 40 or 50 grand a year in costs when you're administering a multi-million dollar federal grant every year. So it's not zero. I think that the information systems we have now are better than when that cost was given to us probably 20 years ago. To where if we can build it into our finance software to be able to do some of the reporting without having to, somebody sit there and go through the ledger and hand create it, I think it'll be easier than it was, 15, 20 years ago. But it's not zero. It's not $1 million.
Zero.
It's one of those things, like Tracy said, it's a net positive if you get a big chunk. If you're getting 50 grand, then it's like, oh God, not worth it.
There more than likely will be other water districts throughout this region and the state that will have evidence of documentation of it indirect, that you could maybe just see what you're saying.
So, yeah, we calculated that when I was at the city of Oceanside. The problem I'm more concerned with is if we had these as requirements, we already have a hard time getting bids on some of our RFPs that we put out. This could make it, impossible to get a bid from some.
So
So,
for certain people just don't want to mess with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
But we want to be prepared. The trick is that we've got a grants administrator. We're working on, getting things filed and trying to get in line at the trough. There's a big giant federal spending package that was approved this year. We want to make sure we're ready when the time comes. And this is just a prerequisite to have the board adopt these. And then the time, whether and when to include them in purchasing agreements will be made at such time as that they be the impact.
I'm going to be the devil's advocate here for a second.
Why not?
Well, somebody,
You're
Come on,
skilled at
Lenny.
it.
somebody has to
Stop it.
figure it out.
time to wind you up.
Okay. I'm reading particularly section 12,
Yeah.
okay,
and as I look through this, there are a couple of items that I'm not exactly sure what they mean, but it strikes me that we've already done most of this. I mean, item B, we have very clear termination for cause and termination for convenience. We require contractors to comply with prevailing wage, which is the essence of the
Right.
Bacon Act. The Copeland any kickback, but I don't think that's going to be very hard to
Yeah.
enforce. So that's number E. I look at F, clean air and federal water pollution. Well, we just went through a preliminary EIR, so we've identified mitigation and all of that. So I don't really know where that's a problem. Debarment and suspension. I'm not sure exactly what the SAM system is, but I'm sure we would be more than happy to prohibit a bidder that has been barred by the federal government from bidding.
Right.
And item number H, the anti-lobbying agreement. I don't see how that really applies to us at all. So help
Yeah.
me understand. My original question when I started reading this was, okay, there's a bunch of stuff
Yeah.
here. I was going to ask, does any of this affect the district in a significant, and the whole part about keeping records, we keep
Right.
records, we do all
Right.
that.
Right. Well, there's
So-
certain,
So I said, what really is what negative impacts do we have? And as I began to step my way through it, it's like, well, wait a minute, we're pretty much, you guys have tuned stuff up really well.
yeah, I think we're
Right.
gonna be able to modify our contracts and stuff to include languages to be specific to this. The trick comes that there's different reporting requirements. They're going to have to submit reports, and then they do have different auditing levels. Tracy, is that correct?
right. So the one item out of the list you're just looking at that had us kind of concerned was D. And specifically where it said that they had to pay, I think it was not less than once a week. Contractor must be required to pay wages not less than once a week. That was a little bit concerning for our contractors if they have to do that, but remember this,
Does that mean they pay
Every
weekly? They
week.
can't pay twice a month or every 2 weeks?
Tracy, can I also add a couple things?
absolutely.
So Tracy brings up, we went through the original document and made several questions and comments. Forcing the contractors, they must change their payroll to once per week, which currently everyone is bi-weekly that we work with. There was also, Flint, you brought up the prevailing wage. Everything in that document is specific to federal, whereas in California, we have to go by the California Department of Industrial Relations. And at our Tracy and I's first glance, it appeared that there could be several conflicts there where we would need to engage legal, the California DIR. And then Tracy, what was the one example we came up with where we did a mock scenario where we're purchasing vehicles from Ford, and Ford would have to, or Chevy, and they had to say some statement, and we didn't know if it was the dealer or what. It was something where it really could lead us down a rabbit hole where a dealership would say, well, we're not willing to do that.
Right.
But the district, again, I'm being the devil's advocate here. I'm personally favor as little regulation of some of this stuff as humanly possible, because the government will screw it up no matter what. I know, been there, done that. So, but as devil's advocate, the case of the Ford dealership. So we are the only governmental entity that is buying vehicles from this
Well,
dealership.
let me finish the answer to
Okay.
the last one. So all these are lumped under all federal source compliance provisions shall include the following. That's if we're specifically using some federal grant funds to buy vehicles, which is going to be a really rare occasion. And that's why these are put under separate section. The other part of the question was the audit requirements. We would be required to do a single audit, which we are this year because we accepted that $1 million. It's an additional audit that we do. It's not that hard, but it is, can be between $10,000 and $20,000 additional costs. So I'm not overly concerned with adopting this policy. I just want you all to be aware that when we look at accepting funds, we want to consider these items. I don't think it's impossible, and I think we should still accept an amount, just not small amount.
It's going to put some headaches into the process, but if we do get a big project, then the big boys will know how to deal with this. Because if you're one of the big contractors, a lot of your contracts come through this stuff. They'll deal with it. If we're going to do a pipeline here, pipeline there, it's unlikely to be with federal money, but a big groundwater, a treatment plant or something like that, where we'll have big projects, that's where this will apply. And that's where the grant money is going to come.
I personally am not concerned because you have shown evidence for years now, many of the things. I think the biggest thing is Tom and several have said, you don't want to have just a small federal grant.
Mhm.
But if the district can be awarded a grant, usually they're by years, and then it has phenomenal benefits. And you will find that some of this is overwhelming at first, but then it becomes, you learn,
Yeah.
it's not as big as some people think at the initial part of the grant.
Yeah, so I managed the grant program at the city of Oceanside too. We did housing grants, we did
Yeah.
large projects. My only concern is just as we jump into it, we don't want to jump in unless we have a lot on the pipeline. So,
One of the benefits that you may wish to consider is to have part of the grant writing to have some funds set aside for a consultant. And that would be someone who already has been awarded a federal grant, similar to what you are doing. They're out there, just like the person who did the report last at the engineering and operation. There are individuals that are out there that are very knowledgeable, that can support you.
You're getting that report next month.
Yeah.
But
But you know
Amelia-
what I'm saying? It's,
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
there's people who have done this. And
Yeah,
they
we
know how
have
to-
our grants person on staff who has managed
Yeah.
these sorts of grants before, and as well as most of the larger engineering firms
Yeah.
have this as a capability as well.
I think it's exciting.
I think taking the grant money is very exciting, and while I chafe a little bit at, more regulation, the flip side is I'm wholeheartedly in support of the calendar item here. I mean, I am. Just. Any other discussion? Okay, then I think this is an item where we are being asked to provide a recommendation to the board, and the staff is recommending option 1. And that is to adopt the changes to the administrative code. So I'm looking for a motion and a second here.
I'll move for
Okay.
option 1.
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved by Julie, seconded by Peter, that we go with option 1. Now, do we do a voice or do we have to do?
You can
vote?
do voice vote if you're all here.
Okay,
Roll
Right.
call is only if somebody's remote. And now that Chad is not seated, you're solid.
all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Unanimous.
Boom.
Fabulous. Okay. Item number 13, variance request for customer. Would that be saline as in saline solution, or does he say saline? What, how does?
I
he
haven't-
pronounce- how does he
I
pronounce his
haven't had
name?
him pronounce it for me. We usually call him Joe when we talk on the phone, but
So
Well, Ms. Rubio has had contact
Yeah,
with him.
there's
What does
very-
he say?
He said the same thing. He just introduced himself as Joe.
Very nice compliment.
this is time for
Of
the
you.
Solomon hats.
Okay, go ahead.
yeah, so we did have good customer service on this one.
Yeah,
and
good.
Interactions. But this is remnant of a few different situations we had with the WhatsApp project where we realized that meter reads that were coming through as zero and then having a service order go back out and check them and they still came through as zero weren't accurate. We had a handful of these that were discovered throughout the WhatsApp project. Knock on wood, this is the last one. Another one we had that some of you may remember was Gilligan Groves. It was, I think, about a year ago.
Mhm.
Anyway, this one, I kind of struggled with this one because I felt like we gave him a pretty decent adjustment to start out with. And I really went back and forth in writing this staff report. And then I kind of stepped back and thought about what we had done on the other, few that we had, because this is a pretty uncommon situation. And at first I felt like what he was asking for was a bit unfair in that we did read the meter. We knew what the actual usage was. It didn't make sense that we would adjust it to what his average use was. But what did make sense to me is that maybe we look at it, look at it differently. It was over, I think it was over a 2-year period, which to me seems sort of egregious on our part at the district that we made that long of an error. Maybe we could look at it the same way we did some of the other customers that had this situation and just do a flat 50% of what should have been billed. In our administrative code, it does state that it's the customer's responsibility to let us know when a meter is reading zero. And to me, that makes sense. But at the same time, if I was to get a utility bill from the electric company and they didn't charge me for a portion for the variable charge for 2.5 years, I'd be pretty angry about it. And I would expect them to meet me part way on it. So I thought it was fair to bring this forward, asking for just a flat 50%. And, hopefully there aren't any more of these. We thought about doing an amendment to the admin code with this, but I really don't expect any more to come through because we've changed every single meter in the district now.
Mhm.
This is no longer an issue, but
Yeah, the old meters would had a wire that connected the register to the radio. And sometimes the communication between the register and the radio get interrupted and the person would ask the radio, hey, what's the read? And it would send a read as if it's a valid read. It was just the last read it got a while ago. And even if they read it through the radio system, it gave them the same thing. And different practices changed since then, is that when they get one of these, you get because they used to just drive by and pick up their new read, thinking they didn't get it. But with the new system, there's no interruption between the register and the dial. They're both in the same unit. And so we don't expect those sorts of failures to occur again. And they're all new meters. So we don't have our number of our check bill counts are down like 85% over the last year and a half from where they were. Or is it higher than that? I don't know. They're way down,
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate.
which is huge because we were doing 1,200 a month having to go out and check meters. Now we're down to, 100, 150.
At
And
one point it was around 300 a cycle, and now I think each cycle is under 100, if not just right there.
Have you proposed this to the customer?
we told him we would take his request to the board, which was just for slightly less than this.
And this is one of those things to where the admin code doesn't tell us what to do, and because it's a rare occurrence. And like Tracy said, maybe we could modify the admin code, but it's such a rare occurrence, this might be something that's best to bring back for deliberation at first here and then to the board. This is where the Solomon hat.
So I thought the substance of his ask, the justification of it was actually ridiculous, but then I stepped away from that and looked at what we had done for the other customers in this
Mhm.
situation and tried to apply a fair request.
How much is he looking for? Dollars?
It was really similar to the $12,372 that's in this report.
And we're proposing to give him,
12,372. He was asking for slightly less than that.
So it looks like he would accept your offer.
Absolutely.
So let's get on with it.
Yeah, we might want to add to the board action report what the dollar amount of his, 'cause
Okay.
I'm not seeing it in here
I
directly.
think I have it here. I just
I
need to
wanted
add
to
it.
speak to
Isn't
that. I
it?
had a hard time figuring out
Yeah, me too.
what the numbers were.
Yep.
I mean, I did get that he got I had to go all the way to the
Okay.
letter to find out that he had gotten a bill for 24,000, almost 25,000. And then what we do is we keep talking about credits.
We're crediting in units, not dollars here. huh?
Yeah, and so,
Okay, I can add the total bill.
Mhm.
and so I guess my mind wants to say, okay, his bill for 5 grand. Right up front, we changed his rate from X to Y, and that brought his bill down to some number, 19 grand, I'm making up a number, 19,000. And then on the 19,000, we did something, we gave him a credit of 12,000, is that right? So then we give
Well,
him.
The
and that
50%.
Gets his bill down to 7. I just really had a hard time understanding the series here.
Oh, yeah, the two credit amounts are on page 1 and then the total of what the two credits were is on page 1 for $6,014.
You might make a table or something that lays it out.
Cause I still didn't know, I mean, how much are we asking him to pay? I still,
12,000.
we're asking him to pay 12,000? Or is he being given a?
He's gonna get
credit?
a $12,372
His
credit, which
credit
is
is
half of the
Mhm.
unpaid bill.
Where?
On the-
We're asking for an additional credit of $6,360, which would bring the total credit amount up to $12,374, which is half of the amount of the variable cost on that bill.
Okay, so. So he would pay another 12 and change, right?
Right.
He'd pay half of what he would have paid for the water if we built it right.
So my question for clarification is, this is evidently a retired member of our community. Just from the letter, you can see,
Mhm.
I think what Tracy has proposed is fair with no negative feelings. I think
Right.
Renee, you worked with him. I think what you're looking for is a win-win here. This is a member of our community since 2007. So,
I just felt like we shouldn't treat him any different than we treated
Yeah.
the other customers in the same situation.
but so what have we done in the past? Are you,
This-
this
This is what
exact-
we've done.
Okay,
I'm
The
asking you to
Gilligan
approve
Groves
what
one
we've
was a
done.
split the
Yeah.
baby thing.
Then
But-
that, whatever we have precedence of doing in the
Mhm.
past is fair. And I think everyone should be treated fairly and consistently.
Any other comments?
So to make sure I understand it, what he's now being requested to pay, he has agreed that's reasonable.
Yes.
In the ballpark, we're a little different than him, the methodology, but it's in the same ballpark.
And I think we ought to approve what you're proposing.
Let's stop
that a motion?
splitting hair on that.
That's a motion.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right.
Yeah,
so-
I second.
Second, so
Let's
it's
not
been moved
split
and
any more
seconded
hair.
to recommend the staff recommendation to the board.
Yep.
And so all those in favor say aye.
I,
Aye.
All opposed, no. No. All right,
Wow. Fast meeting.
Yeah.
Gosh.
I think the other interesting piece of that is that, I'm with Tracy, we have to do what we've done with other customers and we just hope this is the last apple in the barrel. I mean, that's kind of, I agree. And let's face it, even if we did half of what we did with other customers, to the citizen, it makes a huge difference. To the district, it's a difference of $5,000 on a $35 million run rate. What do we, right? So
Too many other things.
I
to do.
support the staff totally.
Yeah, and there might be something that we could put in because this happens periodically. There was a case in Escondido where, and Director Mack, it was one of his friends that it was millions of dollars. But the lady owned a huge grove, didn't get billed, and they went all the way to court and it was a big mess. It happened with a hospital in Poway, as I recall, similar sort of thing. So somehow a lot of these things fall through the cracks and the big users, they never call and say, hey, I'm not getting the right water bill. But then when you find out, you're like, hey, they did use the water. And by law, if they use the water and you can prove they use the water, he talked to his lawyer, he realizes he used the water, he's got to pay something. He doesn't get it for free. But we might want to put something in there that limits, like we have for other types of bill errors, a 3-month process that we can only go back 3 months in our admin code. And it gives staff the ability to deal with it. If we were to put some language in there, there may be a longer duration for something like this, because it might take us a year or something, to where we can put a cap on it. That way, when he comes in, if we find out we're not going to, it'll be years in the future because we have all new meters. But then there'd be something in the admin code. But on the other hand, we've had 2 of these in the last couple of years, so it gives us something to talk about at committee meetings.
Is there a system in place that alerts the staff if a residence or a grove or whatever has a zero meter?
Yeah, that's what
reading?
she was talking about with the service orders that are generated per read
Okay.
cycle.
There's a
Okay.
lot of people who have
So
zero
those-
reads who have wells,
those
Yeah.
things like that.
The difference is that's not a zero read. So what the problem is there is a read that's being sent. It's just the same. So let's
Zero
say that the
consumption.
last time it worked was let's say March 2022 and the read was 495.
Okay,
So what's happening is every month the read is coming 495. And there are some, especially agricultural users, where there's
Yeah.
months they don't use because they're pulling from somewhere
right.
else.
Or
or
it
something
rain.
like
Or it
that.
rains.
So we do have a system in place now where if a zero consumption comes in, every few months a service order will be sent out just to double check that
Right.
they're still locked or, there, something isn't, they aren't using the water, something like.
And over the last 5 years or so, as the old radio read system from Neptune went, and we were still manually reading a quarter of
Right.
our accounts, there just wasn't enough time
Right.
to keep our people were just trying to make sure they could get the rest of the bills out. And so now that our check bills are come way, way down, the meter staff will have the capacity to keep up on these rather than doing the every month fire drill to get the bills out.
mhm. Well, okay,
And with the state of technology and data management that we have today, it's very easy to create, have that data dumped in and regularly spit out zero reads and
Yeah, we're not going to check everyone every
With
month because they're common.
with
There's-
aging, you get 3 in a
Yeah.
row.
There's hundreds of accounts that'll have,
Yeah.
so there's some
Yeah.
people like Director Hamilton. His consumption is zero every month because he runs on a well. And he's only turned his meter on during the fires, they turned it on because he lost power, but he doesn't use the water. And so we got to flag those accounts. And so, all right, don't check that one again because we know, but then every now and then we do got to go check it. So it's just one of those things to where it's easy to fall on a crack.
Item 14, review of the monthly board finance packet.
Okay, so some key highlights would be, we finished the year for sales at 14,890, which is, I think we predicted 14,500, so it's a little bit over what we projected. Currently, if you look at Tom's favorite chart, the water demand chart, that is year to date as of July 31st. We are currently 5% over where we were last year at that time. So we are trending well. It's the first month of the fiscal year, but like to see a positive trend. And then just a keynote on the budget versus actual for June. That is preliminary. That will change as we process our journal entries for year end for the audit.
You can definitely see on the front page of this, the difference between wetter and drier years.
Mhm.
But this does give me some hope that maybe we are finding the bottom of the curve here. We've on this slide. But it's also a really wet year will put us down in the 13,000 range. So I think that, we're budgeting down in the 13 range. That's probably the safer bet.
So if I read this correctly, unaudited and subject to tweaking and hiccups, we basically exceeded expenses by $1.9 million last year. Is that the bottom line?
Yeah, these have so many entries that have to be done to them still that I wouldn't even
And it doesn't include
discern the bottom line
depreciation.
yet. We haven't done depreciation. We haven't done year-end accruals.
Yeah.
We're doing all that right now, so.
When will all of it be done?
September 5th, and that's when the auditors get here and let us know if they have any
Okay.
changes to it.
Okay. So this is a draft.
Mhm.
This is basically our rough notes of
Mhm.
where we're at right now, so. I sometimes hesitate to even include June as a
Yeah.
preliminary because people try to pull, some logic off of it, which would make sense, and it's pulling in the middle of the process, so. But, it is still nice to look at where we're at by line item and be able to comment on if there's going to be any additional changes to it or.
So should we consider this confidential?
This document,
Just-
it's public.
Just
document.
preliminary.
Okay.
This preliminary, yeah.
So the page attachment B with fund balances, those are all subject to change as well.
Mhm.
Those are basically just off of our, our projected 5-year budget, but we have updated the developer projections on attachment V. We've moved some of those around a little bit.
Mhm. Anything of significance that we should be asked to look at here? Renee?
No, just the main things that I pointed out as far as how we ended the year, but. Off to a good start this year.
So our September meeting, we will continue this discussion.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Item 15, list of suggested agenda items for the next meeting. I guess there's no carryover here. So Tracy, what we got? Audit.
Well, I'd say an audit update, and then also I think we should start bringing back this same June preliminary
Mhm.
report for you guys just to see it in this
Mhm.
form. So you'd have to see June and July's next month. It doesn't all get compiled for a little bit until we do the ACFR, which we also present to the committee and the board, but it's nice seeing it in just the operating form, detailed out by line item. So it'll be a little bit more meaningful then.
You think any updates on exit from San Diego Water Authority will be?
Well, we're having a meeting on Thursday, the ad hoc committee meeting, to go over a report they're doing, that they had a subcommittee do on some of the financial impacts. We'll know more after that, but the timing, it's right now supposed to be on the commission's calendar for November. We're supposed to do that last year too, so I'm not gonna
Right.
pin too many hopes on it, but we do expect it to get there. It's all, the whole question is exit fee. That's the
Right.
only real question. There's no other barrier to it. And the legality and or format of said exit fee. Well, also note that the bonds for the Citro CFD sold at, what was the number on that? It was 4 point, they sold really well. They sold like
Mhm.
25 basis points under what they had expected. So the market looked at it favorably. So
Good.
We'll be seeing a big check for our wastewater from that project here soon. The bonds sold, they're expecting sometime this week or next. I expected it all to be distributed.
Good. Pete, I, at one engineering operation, I requested an interest in just visiting some of the projects. Would you have any interest in seeing some of the projects
Yeah.
that the district is doing?
Sure.
So good. Well, Chad, I think you became the point person of that because I thought it'd be good for, as a volunteer, just to sometimes
Sure.
go out and see what we're doing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, so Julie, I can, I'll follow up with an email to the two of you and we'll set up some time for late August or very early September, if that works.
that sound good to you, Pete?
Fine.
Okay,
Chad will be giving a presentation next Monday at the Fallbrook Community Planning Group at the FBUD offices on our Lift Station 1 project. So little show and tell for those folks.
Great. Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to ask.
Good idea. Okay, so after a committee meeting of a whopping 50 minutes, we're gonna adjourn, and I believe this is a record. I think it is a record, so
It's too early to say QED.
Boy, the
haven't gotten
one
there
day
yet.
it was a
So-
long meeting.
so I think we're done. It's a little early, but we can still quit and eat dinner.
All right.
QED.
Thank you very much.
Early dinner today. Thanks,
And Renee,
everybody.
Nice compliment to you on the letter.